Hello again, it's Mrs. Visconti, and today we're going to talk about dividing fractions in a step-by-step manner. Now, in some areas, we're going to see the word fraction. You're going to see in the problems that they're actually whole numbers. What we will do is we will work to make sure that they become a fraction. So there will be some side steps that we will need to make. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. And let's look at our notes. These notes are available in Google Classroom. All right, so our step-by-step process for dividing fractions is simply labeled as the KFC method. Each letter KFC, while it makes you think of chicken, you're actually going to be using each letter in your first couple of steps. So your first step is K, and K stands for the word keep, the first fraction the same. Do not change it. You're actually going to lock it in a box. And the second one is the letter F, and for F, it means to flip the second fraction. The denominator becomes the numerator, and the numerator becomes the denominator. And then our last step is C, which stands for change the division sign to a multiplication sign. And from there, you're going to use the steps to multiply fractions. So what I would like you to do, you're going to have hopefully some paper on hand, and I have some problems I would like us to work out using these steps. So let's go ahead and zoom back out and work from here. All right, so first we are working with the division of numbers, including fractions. So the first thing I'd like to do is change my whole number 3 into a fraction, or write it as a fraction, which is telling me that I have 3 ones so that it still keeps a whole number. So my first step here said to keep the first fraction the same, and we're going to lock it in a box. This fraction will not change, will not flip. It is going to stay as it is. So the second part of our problem here, I'm going to rewrite that fraction, put it back in its box, and I am going to flip the second fraction. My denominator becomes my numerator, and my numerator becomes my denominator. Secondly, thirdly, we're going to go ahead, keeping that first fraction inside the box, having flipped our second fraction. The C in our step says to change the division sign to a multiplication sign. I am now ready to treat this as a multiplication problem, and I can do that because multiplication and division, they have a relationship. They are inverse operations. And so if you remember our last video where we multiplied fractions, we just multiply straight across, and our answer is 15 over 1. When I simplify that, I can write it as 15. All right, let's go ahead and try another fraction problem. This time, you notice that the first number is just like the last one. It is a whole number, so I need to rewrite it as a fraction. So stepping over here, looking at what number 1 is. Number 1 says keep the first fraction the same. We're going to lock that in a box. So now that we've got our first fraction locked up in a box and not changing, we are flipping. Here it is, step 2. Our fraction, our denominator becomes our numerator, and our numerator becomes our denominator. The division sign is still there. And for step 3, that first fraction still in its box. This second fraction is now flipped, and our sign changes to a multiplication sign. Here we have multiplication, which is straight across, and we have 5 times 4, which is 20, and then 1 times 1, which is 1, and I simplify this into a whole number of 20. All right, so now that I have done this, let's do one last problem together. This time I'm not going to write it out in 3 different steps because I think we've got it pretty well done. So the first thing we should do is make sure everything is a fraction. I'm going to lock this first one in a box. And then I will rewrite partially here, but instead of writing a third step, I'm going to go ahead and change my sign and flip my fraction altogether. So this one, we're actually going to end up with a fraction. So let's go ahead and solve using our multiplication skills. We multiply across the top. I cannot simplify these fractions beforehand because they have nothing in common other than 1, which will just give us the same numbers. 1 times 1 is 1, and 6 times 3 is 18, giving us 1/18. All right, students, so this is how we divide fractions, and keeping it in a very simple step-by-step form. First, you use K, keep the first fraction the same, or lock it in a box. Number 2, you're going to flip the second fraction. The denominator becomes the numerator, and the numerator becomes the denominator. And then lastly, you're going to change the division sign to a multiplication sign. You are going to use the steps to multiply those fractions, which we had in another video, if you would like to check that video out. And here are the notes for those steps if you don't quite remember, but very easy 1, 2, 3, 4 steps in multiplying a fraction. All right. Thank you, friends, and I hope that you have a great day. And these notes will be in Google Classroom.